In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how we can build this belt structure that goes around the entire character, going from the front to the back and goes up over the shoulder here, and actually supports this backpack going in the back. So there's a couple different ways that we could go about doing this. I'm just going to hide the floor real quick. So we've already looked at an earlier video where we did an extrusion, and we did it along a path or a curve, and we could use that same functionality and create this belt that goes around the character. The only thing is, making this curve that actually goes around the character could be a little bit tricky. But what I'm going to do is steal this functionality called Make Live. So you can see this little icon here. You can actually select a piece of geometry and you can click the Make Live button up here, and it actually throws the name of that shape within the Make Live. And then now if we go and say create CV curve tool like what we did before, you can actually click and draw points directly onto the surface like that. So that works, but the only problem is we have only one surface that can be made live. If we select multiple surfaces like this and this piece here, maybe the belt, and click Make Live, you can see we can only do one surface at a time like that. So we could just select these pieces and we can make a copy of them. So we're going to duplicate them. We're going to go to Edit, Duplicate, like this, and then hit Shift P, because we have this in a build group and we made the duplicates. It's going to put them in this group here. So if we hit Shift P, it unparents those new pieces from that group. And what we're going to do is combine these all into one object. So we're going to go to Mesh and then go to Combine, and then we're going to delete the history on this thing just to make sure we don't have any kind of nastiness going on. So we're going to hit Alt Shift D after we have that thing selected, and you can see we've got this new chest cover, and I'll just do underscore Make Live like that, just for making things easy. So now we can go to select the surface, Make Live, and then now when we go and do the CV curve point tool, we'll go to create CV curve tool, and now we can go across the object. So we're going to start over here and just work our way around like this. Go to the back of the character like that, and then come all the way to the same point we got here where we started. If you hold down V, we should be able to snap to that same point. Now if we hit enter, it's going to complete the tool. If we hit insert, we can go through and select some of these points and start manipulating them before we complete this tool. So we can kind of make this thing and finesse it just a little bit more. If you tap 4, you could see wireframe. That might help you as you're creating this curve like this. Go through here like that. And if we want, we could look at the drawing and make sure we're kind of following that. Now we can hit the up and down arrow to cycle between these points. So it looks like this might need to be raised up like that. So we're going to have to fix this up. Like that. Push this down here a little bit. So I'm going to go to the perspective view, tap 5, and we got this last point through here. Let's use wireframe. And I didn't realize that. As I was moving this thing around, since I was from the front view and moving those things around, it's based off the camera, so it was actually snapping to the front and not what we were looking for. So I'll just go ahead and move these points back around. Just make sure I grab one of them like this, and you can see we're about back to where we were at before. I'll hit this last point here like this and make sure I'm snapping to that. So hold down V again like this and just snap right to that point there. And I think we should be good for this curve. I'm going to just finesse that just a little bit more like that. Tap 5, and then we can hit enter, and that'll build our curve for us. Okay, so the next part is actually making the face that we need to extrude for the thickness of this thing. So if we go to the front view and we kind of think about the shape of this thing a little bit, if we do something like this, if we go to the mesh tools and we go create polygon tool, we could just do, and I'm actually drawing on the surface of that. Let's click that off. We don't need that functionality now. If I just draw something out like this, you know, we could extrude that along there. That's possible for us to do. The other thing we could do is maybe draw a shape that looks a little bit more like this. And if we want to turn on the grid, we could use the grid to make sure we're snapping and everything's nice and straight. I'll turn soft select off, tap B, tap W for this. Make sure we are in world space so we could, for our movement, so we can snap to the grid. And then I'll drag this here. Hold on X to temporarily turn on snap to grid and move this over here. And then I'll snap down here. I'll go here. If we wanted to be really picky and we wanted to use the grid to make sure we've got perfect spacing for this stuff, we could do that as well. I'm going to have to move this over a little bit more like this, and then here we got this. And here, like that. And then now we could take these points, scale them in, something like that. And we can take these points and we could scale them down as well. And I want to get this whole thing more like this. So you can see if I put this up here, rotate it into place, and get more of this shape that I'm looking for here. I don't think it's going to need to be that big. We could use this as our starting point to extrude from. And we've got the curve selected. And then now we need to go right click and say object mode, select this object here, and then we need to select the face for it. So let's go back here and select face like this, and then now we can say shift right click and extrude face along here. And now we need to up the divisions, so you can see as it goes along through here, it's going to make that shape for us, and it's going to max out at 25 divisions. So let's tap 5 to take a look at this. And what I was saying whenever we made the piece that you see here for this hook is that after this has been created, we'd still have the opportunity to come in here and tweak the shape of this curve. So I'm going to go into wireframe mode and then just right click in here, and we need to select CV tools or curve editing tools. So I'm trying to get along through here. If we hide our polygons, just so we're not selecting that, if we right click on there and now we say control vertex, we can select that, and now we can show our polygons. It just wasn't letting me right click on that and select any of this stuff the other way. So I'll select this here and tap W, and let's move this piece forward, this point. I got a point here like that. Let's move this forward just a little bit more. And that's the back part of the belt. I'm hitting the down and up arrow keys to cycle between what point am I working with on here. So we got this. I'll push it through here like that, and you can see how we can kind of tweak this thing even after it's been created. So I might move it there, some of these points, and kind of get them evened out a little bit. So it's not going to be perfect, but what I'm trying to do is just get as much as I can out of this thing before I start tweaking it by hand, because we will have to at some point just delete the history on this thing and start manipulating it by hand at that point. But this at least gives you the functionality to start creating this thing and not have to do it all by hand, because it is quite a bit to try to create a structure like this all by hand. So I'm just taking these points and I'm moving them out like this, and I missed a point through here because it just wasn't visible to me. Like that. And you just, the goal is to make it feel as if it's draped on there a bit more natural. And you want to get these endpoints as close as you can to each other. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we do want them to feel as if they flow into each other, because we're going to join this all together when we're done. And we can go to the front view and try to match this up to the drawing just a little bit better. Kind of like that, but it's cutting into the chin a little bit, and I think that's okay. The only part that I'm really not too happy about is this right here as it flows over this this piece here. I want to make sure it's not cutting into the geometry too bad. So push this over just a little bit, push this in. And then now I know we don't have any kind of twist to this thing, so if we select this piece of geometry, you can see the extrude face that you have here. There is a twist control on here. We could try to use that to our advantage, and you can see we can kind of twist this thing as it goes around like that, but I would like more control to where I could actually twist at each one of these points there. That'd be more ideal, but I'm just going to have to kind of leave this where it sits. So let's delete the history on it. We're going to hit Alt-Shift-D to delete history. And then now we don't need this face here. So select F11, select the face here, and we'll select this face here. And now we need to sew these points up together. So let's tap 4 to take a look at this, and we can go select F9 and select our verts, and we can go shift right click over the top of them, merge to center, and we can just drag over here, tap G, and you can see how we're sewing these things together at this point. Tap 5, take a look at it, and I missed this point here. Tap G. You can take a look at it, and you could look at it with a smooth mesh preview. You can tap 3 and you can see what it would look nice and smooth. So tap 1. Now you might see that the spacing along through here dependent on those points that we laid out, so you might not need all this geometry in here. We looked at an earlier video. If you select this edge, control right click on it and say to edge loop and delete, you can just get rid of some of these edges, and then you just select an edge and hit G for your last command. And let's get this, just make sure I'm working with the right one here. I'm going to delete history, Alt-Shift-D, hit F10, and since I just did a few operations, I've got to do that again. Control right click, to edge loop utilities, to edge loop and delete. I'm going to select this and hit G. We can work our way around the model, kind of like this. And if we don't have enough, like say we take away too much, we can put another piece in there. But maybe I want to double click this, maybe I want to slide this over just a little bit before I do so. So I can control right click, actually shift right click, and then use the slide edge tool and middle mouse drag that right about there. And then now I can go and shift right click, and we can use insert edge loop tool this time and just insert an edge loop right there. So depending on if you need to take some or remove some, that's going to be up to you. I'm going to double click on this right here. Let's double click on this edge and then shift right click and slide edge tool, middle mouse drag it down just a little bit. And that tool tries to look at the curvature that's kind of going on in the geometry and preserve it, so that kind of comes in handy. If we look at this now, this is kind of sticking out. So it's just, you're going to kind of have to evaluate this geometry and see what's been created and see if you need to tweak it a little bit. And so you might need to even rotate some of this just a little. This is something new in Maya, so you could change the pivot point. You could tap D, but then they've got this new like rotator manipulator, and you can match this thing up closer to the angle that you got going on here. And if you tap D again, you can see we changed the rotation of the manipulator. And so now we can just rotate it like this and then move it in ever so slightly like that. So that does come in pretty handy. So I'm going to rotate this thing again, rotate it out just a little bit, and I need to do the same thing here. So I'll tap D, I'll move the manipulator something like this and then rotate it this way. I'll just try to match up that angle a little bit better, and then tap D again, and then now I can rotate this thing out like this a little bit. So that's helping out. And I'll select this one, move it down a little bit, select this one, move it down just a little bit, just to try to get a nice flow going around this entire thing. Okay, so this is starting to work fairly good. I can rotate this in just a little bit and then move it in. Select this, move it out just a little bit, kind of like that. And really at the top of this, we'd probably want this to be more flat as it comes to the top. So if we double click this, try not to move it, I'm trying to select it. So let's rotate. We'll tap E for rotate, and I'll tap D to change this manipulator. Like that. Tap D again, and now I can kind of rotate this thing over. So I'll double click that, rotate it this way a little bit more, double click this, rotate it this way a little bit more. And I think we're getting pretty good. I just wanted it to feel a little bit more flat on the top of this. Maybe I'll finesse some of these points just a little bit by moving them. And I think that's starting to feel pretty good. So we can call this maybe like chest belt. And I'll just middle mouse drag this up here. And we don't need this piece anymore because we used the make live function on it, so we just get rid of that, and we can get rid of the curve as well. So let's go here and say normals, soften edge, like that, and we can go back to our flat shade all. And we're starting to see the character here. Tap 7 to turn on my lights, and I'll put this up into this build temp. And it looks like we got some leftover group stuff from whenever we merged that thing together for the make live. And I think I had the floor here, so I can turn that back on like that. Okay, and we'll save this as the latest iteration. File save scene as, and I'll give this a pirate model underscore 13 at the end. And that'll do it for this video for making this section here. So I know that was kind of complicated and there's a lot to it, but you know, once you get used to that workflow, it's not going to be too bad. But again, if you had to extrude each one of these things out and move it around the character, that could be a pretty tough operation. So as difficult as this might be for some new people, it's definitely going to be a lot easier than trying to make that whole thing by hand.